Good morning. Hello, creative nonfiction writers. It is the beginning of week 4 together, and we'll be talking and thinking through this week some questions around the first person narrator in creative nonfiction. How much of ourselves do we really want on the page? And it's an answer that, there's no one answer, of course. We answer that question all the time when we sit down to write. But we'll be reading the LaPlante Chapter 2, The Splendid Gift of Not Knowing, which doesn't always feel splendid, but it can be great for our writing if we're more open that way. A couple of notes. We will be working in small groups like this throughout the whole quarter. So there's not a workshop component to this class like in some other creative writing classes. If you've taken one, there's a long workshop process at the end of the class. We're not going to do that. We're going to stay in the small groups. Some of us have been affected by the fire, so if you need to come and go, just come back into the class when it works for you and don't let it stress you out. And let's see, small group. Okay, so if have you found something that you've always wanted to write about and you're starting to write about it, you may substitute this for the exercises that I give you in small group. Just let your small group know, look, this is the memoir I've always wanted to write. And instead of the exercise, I'm going to post 1,750 words. We're not going to be able to do huge chunks of it. But if you do want to substitute the writing exercise or prompt, if you want to substitute a project that you're excited about for that, that's totally fine at this point in the course. And so this week, talking about the first person, the I in creative nonfiction. It's always an artistic device, and we create this persona for the purposes of the writing, and it will change according to what we're writing, right? We may choose to have much of ourselves in one piece of writing, and then in the next piece we want to hold back on that, but you're in charge. And there are some examples this week of some writers. Sharon Olds is mentioned, and along with some other poets. So I thought in my lecture this morning I would read a couple of poems that I love to you and just talk about the presence of the poet in these two poems and how that comes across. And these poems demonstrate some of what we've been talking about, the smaller details and how they add up in their connotation, in their sound, in the context of what's being said in the poem. So the first one I'm going to read is a poem by the poet Garrett Hongo, or Ongo in Espanol, and it's a poem called The Legend. Right here on my laptop. Okay, this is The Legend by Garrett Hongo, 1951, in memory of J. Kashiwamura. Okay. The Legend. In Chicago, it is snowing softly, and a man has just done his wash for the week. He steps into the twilight of early evening, carrying a wrinkled shopping bag full of neatly folded clothes, and for a moment enjoys the feel of warm laundry and crinkled paper, flannel-like against his gloveless hands. There's a Rembrandt glow on his face, a triangle of orange in the hollow of his cheek, as a last flash of sunset blazes the storefronts and lit windows of the street. He is Asian, Thai, or Vietnamese, and very skinny, dressed as one of the poor, in rumpled suit pants and a plaid mackinaw, dingy and too large. He negotiates the slick of ice on the sidewalk by his car, opens the Fairlane's back door, leans to place the laundry in, and turns for an instant toward the flurry of footsteps and cries of pedestrians as a boy, that's all he was, backs from the corner package store, shooting a pistol, firing it, once at the dumbfounded man who falls forward, grabbing at his chest. A few sounds escape from his mouth, a babbling no one understands, as people surround him, bewildered at his speech. The noises he makes are nothing to them. The boy has gone, lost in the light array of foot traffic, dappling the snow with fresh prints. Tonight, I read about Descartes' grand courage to doubt everything except his own miraculous existence. And I feel so distinct from the wounded man lying on the concrete, I am ashamed. Let the night sky cover him as he dies. Let the weaver girl cross the bridge of heaven and take up his cold hands. I love this poem. I think it's so beautiful. And the details at the beginning, the very careful way in which the poet has layered this scene, it gives this really textured sense. There's no first-person speaker until we get to the penultimate stanza. Tonight, I read about Descartes' grand courage to doubt everything, and I feel so distinct from the wounded man lying on the concrete. So he paints a portrait of what has happened in this street violence, and then explores his own relationship with it and his own feelings of shame, and survivor's guilt. And then the last stanza, let the night sky cover him as he dies. Let the weaver girl cross the bridge of heaven and take up his cold hands. It's so beautiful. So that's an example of a poem, of a piece of writing in which the first person appears at the end in a really thoughtful and profound and honest and clear way. But it doesn't start there. It builds to it, right? It starts with this scene that slowly builds to a real loss and a very sudden trauma, okay? And then I'm going to read this poem by Jane Kenyon, who's mentioned in the, I think in the La Plante this week, and she was a poet who wrote very directly about struggling with depression, and she was a beautiful poet, and this poem is called Let Evening Come. It's a very famous poem, and there's no first-person speaker in it, but you get the real sense of the person and the longing and the mind behind the stanzas, okay? Let evening come. Let the light of late afternoon shine through chinks in the barn, moving up the bales as the sun moves down. Let the cricket take up chafing as a woman takes up her needles and her yarn. Let evening come. Let dew collect on the hoe abandoned in long grass. Let the stars appear and the moon disclose her silver horn. Let the fox go back to its sandy den. Let the wind die down. Let the shed go black inside. Let evening come. To the bottle in the ditch, to the scoop in the oats, to air in the lung, let evening come. Let it come as it will, and don't be afraid. God does not leave us comfortless, so let evening come. I love this poem. I argue whenever I read it that it's a poem. It's a poem for the atheist. It's a poem, a thinking poem, a poem about really questioning faith. When she says God does not leave us comfortless, at the end, I really think that she's saying, really the only comfort is death. I mean, the images are so stark and so brutal. They're these family of images, rural, but containers, and just the blackness filling up each container. So it's it's a longing for oblivion. And when the mention of God at the very end, I just totally don't believe that that's what she's saying. I don't believe that she's saying that. I think the only comfort really, God does not leave us comfortless because death is the ultimate comfort. I don't know. Maybe I'm depressed. I don't think so. But anyway, there's a couple of poems that I love. I hope you enjoy them. Again, the sense of the speaker behind the poems as an individual way of seeing the world. And so that's what we're doing in creative nonfiction. We're listening to ourselves and we're bringing ourselves to the page. And it's up to each of us how much of a risk we want to take with our inner world. But I encourage you to use the class as a safe place to explore some of these questions and go for it. All right, see you in the Canvas.